Hi, I'm Brian Dunn, and welcome to the most important podcast ever. What makes it so important? It's not about me, it's about you. This podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the moments of resilience, the lessons learned, and the small acts that made a big difference. From retail floors to boardrooms to Main Street and their beautiful small businesses, we'll share the untold stories that shape lives and careers. This week is part 2 of our discussion with David Grau Sr., an accomplished author, lawyer, small business mechanic, and somebody whose conversation I thoroughly enjoyed in part 1, and I think you will enjoy this one as well. David, thank you so much for part 2. I would very much like to pick up on building with the end in mind. That's kind of where you led us beautifully in the first part. So let's build with the end in mind. How do you think about that?
Well, great. Well, first, and thank you for having me on. This is the most important podcast ever, so I appreciate being here. Building with the end in mind, it took me about 27 years to write that book. And so building with the end in mind was written for a founder who effectively owns a business that has systems and processes. It has consistent top-line growth. It has a group of key employees that have authority to carry out tasks and to help run that business, not necessarily as an owner. They're given authority by virtue of their intelligence and their training and their passions. And that's powerful because, what's the next step? Well, now you can build with the end in mind. And when I sit down and I talk to small business owners, and again, my idea of small business is fairly small. These aren't folks who typically think someday an IPO. These are anywhere from 2 to maybe 25 people total, employees and owners. Truly what I would call a small business. And so when I ask them, how does your story end? In fact, there's literally a chapter in the book, how does your story end? Think about it. The most common answer I get is, it doesn't. I'm going to work forever. I love what I do. This is the most valuable asset I own. Why would I ever leave it? And I think, that's a great answer. Except we're all mortal. We still have to lay out a plan. And so building with the end in mind is, let's not start with the thought about selling the business and walking away. Let's make that plan B. Let's start with the plan of perpetuating what you've built and passing it along to the next generation. Don't give it away. You sell it little by little, slice by slice, to people who want to invest their money, their profits, their time, and their careers on top of what you've built. That's the greatest compliment, I think, ever for a small business owner.
Do you find many children of founders are interested in that? Or is it sort of reflective of the general population?
I spent a lot of my career working with independent financial advisors, which if you're 18 and you're not sure what you want to be when you grow up, an independent financial advisory practice, also called using an RIA, a registered investment advisor, is probably the most valuable professional service business on the planet. It has greater profitability, more sustainable growth because it's a highly regulated business, but it's built to track the markets out there. And while the markets go up and down over 20 years, they mostly go up. And so in that business model, we had a lot of sons and daughters that wanted to be owners of a business. But they weren't the only owners of the business. One or two key employees joined them. So we stopped calling them family businesses and we call them family-like businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Because being a son or daughter is a cool thing of the founder, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be the next CEO.
That's right.
That's a skill set.
Yep.
That's not something you inherit.
I think that is such a healthy perspective. And I would imagine so much of the attraction to be part of that on a deeper, meaningful ownership level is directly tied to the quality of life that the founder has. Is the founder locked in on a treadmill, or is the founder enjoying what he or she is doing? And I know that may sound too simple by a bit, but really and truly, it's got to go into the algebra, the calculus of the people that are thinking about this.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because so when I wrote this book first, this is written for what I call G1 or Generation 1, the business founder. And you'll learn something about me. I don't use the term business to describe something that isn't a business. I call that a job with overhead. So I wrote this one first. And then I kept running into the problem that the founders wanted to perpetuate what they'd built, but they hadn't built a business yet. And so, just like in Star Wars, you do the main movie first, and then later on, you write the prequel. And so the prequel is the founder's treadmill. You got to get off the treadmill, and you got to build something that can run through your key employees, through your son or your daughter. I mean, not entirely. I'm not putting the owner out to pasture here, but you have to have something that is growing and profitable and founder independent in order to perpetuate it. So the two books kind of work together.
And what order would you have them read in?
So, great question, and the tough answer is this. I think that at 25 people or less, 99% of the small businesses that I have worked with in the US and Canada, they're running on a treadmill. And they don't know it, Brian. They don't realize that passion and hard work and total control and being the smartest person in the room, that's not a system.
Right.
It works for 2 or 3 or 4 years, but it won't work forever. And eventually it gets more and more fragile. So if you're able to, slow down just long enough, maybe on a Sunday afternoon with a nice cup of tea, and look around and just take that 2-week stress test. If you couldn't come into work for 2 weeks, would your business be as good or better than when you left it? Not many people can say yes to that. And if you can't say yes firmly, start with the founder's treadmill. If you just came back from a 4-week sabbatical and your business is growing better than ever based on the talents of your authorized, leveraged key employees and your son or your daughter, you probably own a business, and that's a good thing. Then build with the end in mind. Start today and get serious about it, because that business could still be around 30 years after you retire, and that's a cool thing.
Yeah, 3 quick things you just made me think of. One, really appreciated the Star Wars reference. really appreciated that. 2, it's completely counterintuitive to go on a 4-week sabbatical, come back, and the business is running better. You should view that as the most positive testimony to that you've built a business, as opposed to, oh my goodness, it doesn't need me. And 3, oh, look, everything got loose while I was gone. It might feel good, but it's actually indicative of an underlying problem that you've built a job with overhead.
But Brian, one of the quick stories I told in the book was, I was doing really well in my small business. We had We had just hit $1 million in gross revenue. It took us about 6 or 7 years to get there. I thought I was king of the world, right? If I could do that, I could do anything. We were totally a hub spoke, business model, and I was the hub. I had like 8 or 9 people on staff. They brought everything to me. I was the most important person in the room. I loved it, but
Of course.
nothing worked without me. So I hired. I didn't understand. I never saw that book written by anybody else. So I didn't understand that I was on the founder's treadmill and I was just going faster and faster and harder and harder. And I couldn't get past the $1 million gross revenue number. No matter what I did, there were no more hours in the day. So I hired a consultant. And one day he said, I'm going to hire a marketing director. And I said, we don't need a marketing director. They're expensive and I already do it. I was going out and I was literally speaking on stage about 100 times a year. I was flying from city to city, airport to airport, 2 million miles with Delta, and I loved it. Who could market better than I could? He goes, no, you don't get it. I'm going to hire a marketing director who actually has skill and education and experience marketing a small business in this arena. And she's going to put together, or he's going to put together a marketing budget and a plan for the next coming year. We're going to figure out what growth rates we want to obtain, at what level of profitability, how many clients, what kind of clients, and where they're going to come from. And then we're going to figure out, after we get those people in, who's going to service them and who's going to do the work. And I thought, oh, this guy's just totally nuts. We hired this wonderful young lady, and she came in and set up a marketing plan and a budget. And we started to grow faster at a stable rate year after year after year. We knew what was going to come in because we planned for it. We laid it out. We learned from year to year. And I finally stepped back and said, okay, I'm not a marketing director. And then he came in and said, now we're going to hire a sales director. And at that time I was receptive and I said, I get it. I'm not the sales director either. And we, little by little, and just to wrap this up quickly, we began to hire people with specific skills and educations in fields I didn't have. And no matter how hard I worked, no matter how hard I tried, I had 11 years of post-college education. I didn't know what they knew. And we hired good people and we trusted them to do their jobs. It changed everything.
Well, it created more organizational capacity, I imagine.
It sure did. Almost immediately. And I was just, I was shocked and I'm a little embarrassed that it took me that long to figure it out. But they didn't teach that class in law school. So
I don't think it's embarrassing at all. I imagine it's quite common.
that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
If it happens to me, it's happening to a lot of people out there. Let's fix
Is that one of the mistakes you see most often?
Um, I I think every small business owner, every entrepreneur, well, let's put it that way, um, likes control. They didn't have it as an employee. They want it as a business owner. And they want it so bad, they try to keep it forever. And they keep everything very close to the vest. They want to be the hub of the wheel. And again, you have to do that for the first couple of years or you won't
Yep.
survive. But you can't keep doing it or you won't survive.
Yeah. Because whether you're running seems to me, and there are so many corollaries in big corporations that I'm familiar with, if you are limited to the leader's field of vision, then by definition, you're going to be limited to what you can accomplish.
Yeah,
And
and that's well said. When I started surrounding myself with smarter people, at least in their given fields, and
yep.
we'd sit down and we'd have a brainstorming meeting. Smartest thing I ever did was just shut up and listen. We had
It's
ideas from different ages, from different walks of life, from
yeah,
different educational backgrounds. And when we walked out of that meeting, sometimes I didn't have to say a thing. We had a plan. It was
yeah.
wonderful.
That's really, really cool. And that's when you start to get into the world of this is sustainable. We're
Yeah.
building a business here. We've got a business here.
We
Um,
got to about 25 people, And I actually could see the end in mind. I knew how I wanted it to end, and I wanted to be the first person out of our business to execute a succession plan. And I did. But it took us about 15 years to do it.
And I bet a succession plan when you started your business was the furthest thing from in your mind, right?
I remember sitting down, with the consultant we hired, and he said, this business will never last without you. And if you continue on that trajectory, you've got no business. It has no value. No one will ever invest in it or buy you out. You'll work on it forever, and then you'll fold the tent. And I thought, I feel very successful, but he's right. And I'm going to change the trajectory starting right now. I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, well, I think it's so powerful and such powerful learning, and I'm so glad you're sharing it because it is human nature to fall into that trap. It's completely the way we're wired.
And by the way, it feels wonderful to be the most important person in the room.
Oh, yeah.
But at some point, and for now, for those of you who are still on that treadmill, it feels even more wonderful to hire and train a team, to trust them, and to have them come to you only when they really need you,
Yeah.
because they've taken care of everything else for you. And
Yeah.
the nice thing, about most small businesses are run kind of respectfully. They're kind of run chaotically. You kind of lurch
Mhm.
from one problem, one fire drill to the next.
Yeah.
I think, at least, you've run a lot bigger businesses than I have, but as a small business, the best small business is the quiet one. The, the
Oh,
fire drill is the exception, not the rule. And when
absolutely.
there's a fire drill, your teammates, your next generation folks, they put it out.
You know what's dangerous about a fire drill, David, in my opinion? You can become addicted to the adrenaline rush of
Yeah.
going in and being the firefighter to put the fire out and to carry the people out. And it can become very, boy, I added value today. I put out a fire.
It's nice being the most important person in the room,
Yeah.
but that's not a system.
No, that's right. That's right. That's a, that is just true as can be. Um, do you think you started your succession planning? And is that the right phrase for this? Do you think you started it later than you wish you had? Knowing what you know now, would you have started it earlier? Or do you think you started it at the right time?
One of the points I make, and this is totally a succession planning book, one of the points I make in there is that almost everyone starts too late. One of the reasons they start too late is because they don't have a founder independent business. So that's why I wrote the prequel after the main movie came out. Um, I I think from start to finish, our company's succession plan with me as the first person to lead took about 10 years to execute. Longer than that, for all the payments and everything, but 10 years to fully execute. And so when I think about it, at age 55 or so, I sold the first block of stock. And just to be clear, in 60 seconds, a succession plan isn't a sale to a third party, at least in my world. A succession plan is when you set up an S Corp or an LLC, maybe taxed as a partnership. Um, you sell 10% of your stock at a time, maybe 10% twice to key employee one and to a key employee two, maybe even a son or a daughter. And then 5 years later, you sell them another 10%. You don't give it
Mhm.
away. You don't even discount it most of the time. But they get a bank loan, they buy in, slice by slice to the business. So when I sold my first, batch of stock, if you will, and I dropped down from, having most of the control. Um, I think I sold like about 20%. And I took the money, and my wife and I went and built a house on the coast. And after COVID, we lived there. That was our full-time abode. I didn't have to go into the office every day. You know why? Because the business was founder independent. I love that.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
cool.
but the business was also growing, at about 25 to 30% a year. And so what most founders say is, well, I don't want to sell because it's going to triple and double in size in about 3 years. It
Yeah,
almost triples in value um, over the time. And so, but you also have to have strength in numbers, right? Um, a good sized business that grows fast could need 2, 5, 10 next generation employees. If you've got good people and you want to hang on to them, they don't wait forever. Uh, you hire the right people, you give them authority, you teach them to think like an owner. They want equity. And
yeah,
so, at the same time, you're trying to hold on to it because it's growing. They are saying, it's getting more expensive. I want to buy more now. I'll go
right,
get a bank loan. And so,
right.
once you start down that slope, as a lawyer, we use the term slippery slope as a bad thing. But in a succession plan, it's a good thing. At
Mhm.
some point, you have to get out of the way and let the people you've taught and you hired and mentored and taught and empowered, you got to let them fly. That's the
Right,
job. And
right.
that's hard, but that's the job. You've got to build with the end in mind. So,
But the methodology you just
yeah.
described still allows you to enjoy much of the appreciation of the
Oh, yeah.
business while you're giving your team a piece of it. I think it's absolutely brilliant strategy, David. I really do. Um, I'd love to move now. You talk about stewardship and leadership.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit about that and how you think about that relative to these
Well, so
businesses.
I try to teach, the concept of as a founder, you may be the most important person in the room for a good part of your journey, but that's not just fun and games and feel good times. It comes with obligations too. You're surrounded in a small business by what I call your stakeholders, and I actually wrote a book about this. It's called the Stewardship Advantage. And what it basically says is, hey, your stakeholders, every small business is a little different, but they are your key employees. They're your partners, your customers, your suppliers. Even your environment. I come from Oregon. That was a big deal out there. But your community, the place where you work, that the little town or the corner of drugstore in Manhattan. But that community, those are your stakeholders. And as an owner, I think you have a duty to do the best you can for your stakeholders. That's not good deeds. It's not best efforts. I actually advocate for writing it down. You've heard that a few times on this podcast. Make a stewardship plan. You don't have to help everybody at once. You don't have to help everybody equally. Um, Patagonia, they're all about the environment. That's number one. In our small business, in my own small business, our number one stakeholder certainly would be our client base, but number two would be our employees. We gave them the opportunity. I don't know if we gave. They earned the opportunity to be equity partners, and when they had earned it, we gave them the opportunity to buy in. And so they
Mhm.
were minority owners to be sure, but we let that happen. And people say, well, David, how do I get my son or daughter to think like an owner? And my answer is, let them write a check. Give them the true opportunity to buy in. There's nothing
Mhm.
like that. But if you do well by your stakeholders, they tend to do well by you. Don't confuse good deeds with a good plan. And
Mhm.
succession planning is part of being a good steward.
Over the years, has your definition of success changed?
Yeah.
Is it sort of like Maslow's hierarchy where as you've had your basic needs met, or has your core definition of success changed?
Well, so yes, let's set the table for that and see if I can do this in 2 minutes.
Take three,
I
David. It's okay. Go.
okay. So I'm actually technically retired. I sold the last of my equity about 3 years ago, and when I met my wife, we were high school sweethearts, and somewhere along the way, I think I promised her a horse farm, and she held me to it. So we moved back to the Midwest, bought her 10 acres. She had, gets up in the morning and she has coffee with her two horses, and that was her dream in life. So I made that happen, and I love it. But that's not the answer to your question. And so I totally sold out all my equity, and I left the business that was my life after about 27, 28 years, and then all of a sudden my world got real quiet. So I spent my time writing books. I literally wrote 4 books in about 3 years. I love doing that, but there's an interesting chapter late in this book, which is my most recent book, and it's called Looking Back, What I Would Do Differently Next Time. I'm
Mm.
proud of all that I did. I'm glad I had a succession plan. I'm glad I built a founder independent company. But there are some costs involved in that too. And as a small business owner, I'm duty bound to tell you what they are. Whatever you do, go in fully informed.
Right.
There are always choices to make.
Always. Always. I have to tell you, since you told me about the horse farm when we spoke earlier, I have terrible FOMO because that's like my dream too. I think, how cool is that? What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. And by the way, does your wife love it?
She loves it. I married a farm girl, so and I sit inside and write books because I, I'm not an equestrian by nature. As I tell people who come to visit and work on the place and take care of things, my wife is the CEO. I'm the CFO. I just write the checks,
I
and it
and
works.
you have so many books. You've got to stay locked in that room to keep writing them. Every time I bring up a topic, boom. Uh,
I, I
it's
refer to
very
my wife's main horse as 1,350 pounds of attitude and muscle. And she keeps saying, someday I'm going to get you on him. And I said, yeah, you're going to probably have to drug me first.
Thomas in our studio is laughing because he has horses at his family farm and he knows exactly what you're
Okay.
talking about. Um, that's really cool. Um, I want to sort of look forward a little bit. So you have uh, your current work, your writing, teaching. Yes,
Yes, I love to teach.
do you? I can tell. It shows. It shows, and you have a lovely way of making things simple. I think it's a really interesting time for that too. How do you think about the future of entrepreneurship?
Okay. At 3 o'clock this morning, I will think of the best possible answer to that question. But let me try right now.
All
Um,
right.
I don't watch the news anymore. As an older retired guy, in his late 60s, I read it. I read about 10 minutes of news a day. And that's all I can take.
Hmm.
I I think that with all the consternation out there about inequity, inequality, um, wages not keeping pace with inflation, and they probably and they don't. It's tough for businesses to adjust that fast. They've got a bottom line to protect. I think that on top of the 500 million small business owners currently doing their work every day around this planet, I think that number in the next 20 years, maybe in my lifetime, doubles. You want control of your future, or at least more than you have now? Want to make a better living? You'd be surprised how hard you have to work for it, but it's your choice. I think entrepreneurship, I think small business ownership, it is the path forward. I think AI is going to help it. I don't think it's going to solve all the problems, but I think it solves some of the problems and it makes small business ownership more accessible. And if I were 22, 23 years old, go get a job. That'll give you the motivation and the lessons you need to open a small business someday and do it your way. You may not get it right the first time. Keep trying. That's freedom
I
if you build it right.
I think that's as good as any 3 a.m. answer. And maybe because I vehemently agree with you. I think AI is going to force some career changes. And I do believe we're going to see an explosion of
Yeah,
small businesses because you're right. And your wisdom is, I think, on the dime. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it does remove some of the barriers to entry. And it
yeah,
really does come down to how much of me am I willing to invest in terms of my labor, my uh, vision, and all those things, writing a check here and there when you need to. I think it's coming at us, and I think there's a huge, huge green light for small businesses
yeah.
and entrepreneurs. I really do. But you got to
But
roll up your sleeves, David. And that's not
yeah.
lost on me throughout your narrative, throughout your story.
And in 60 seconds, let me make one final addition there. One of the things I put in this book that, and again, it's not a difficult long book to read, but go ahead and dream, chase your passions. That's cool. But one half of today's small businesses, at least here in the U.S., according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, won't still be around. In 10 years, two-thirds won't be around.
That's
They may
right.
be small, but don't think simple. Small businesses in this day and age, with the tax codes that you have to navigate,
Yeah.
entity structures, cash flow, profitability, you got to build them right. Don't wait until they get bigger to implement the proper systems. That won't work. By day one, if not before day one, lay out a plan and build by design.
Right.
Don't just depend on hard work. Hard work's cool. Design and hard work, that's the path to surviving 10 years.
Our guest, Kate Seraph, a couple of episodes ago, she is the CEO and founder of a company called Dip.
I watched that.
Oh, did you? Well, one of the
Dreams in
things,
progress.
exactly,
Yeah.
bingo. I was very impressed by Kate, and a couple of things really stuck out to me, and I want you to react to this. Um, Kate said when her first business failed, she was mortified,
Yeah.
and she was so personally invested in it, and it took her a little time to pull the lessons out of it and make this next one, which has been very successful, um, more sustainable. And I think that I think we can't be afraid of making mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. How do you think about that?
I'd turn it around and I'd put it a different way. Don't be afraid of, of great success. Chase it down, tackle it,
Yep.
but do it smartly. One of the things Brian and I were talking about before this is that when I wrote my most recent book, I wrote it to meet you where you're at. And one possibility is you want to get off that treadmill entirely. You want to be CEO of a 25, 40, 50 person, small business where you can take the whole summer off and it comes back, you come back to a stronger business than you left. You got the complete C-suite, CFO, COO, CIO. That's cool. But another possibility is you like your treadmill. You like being the most important person in the
Yeah.
room. You don't want more than 5 or 6 great employees. So stay on the treadmill and run smarter on
Yeah.
purpose with the design. And the third choice is now that you know you're on it and you like it, maybe you stay on it. You've got choices. And that's the coolest thing about being a small business owner. You've got choices. But whatever you do it great. And don't be afraid to succeed. But it's going to take more than hard work.
You, that's why you're the best-selling author, because
Thank you.
you said that so beautifully and so succinctly. Um, what is by way of closing, David, and I am so grateful for your time, and I hope from time to time, as things catch your interest, you'll let us know, because we'd love to have you back and talk about
My
things that you
pleasure.
think are interesting, or book 5, 6, 7, 8, because there were 9 Star Wars movies. I'm just saying. Um, what is the most important leadership lesson you've learned? And what's the most important business lesson you want to leave our audience with?
In terms of leadership, don't be afraid to hire people who are better than you. That's not as easy as it may sound. You think, well, that's the smart way to do it. It's hard when you're used to being the smartest person and the most important person in the room to not be. But if you want to build a business that can go on without you, it's absolutely necessary. And in terms of a business lesson, um, not to intimidate anybody, but small businesses, I don't like the word complicated. Small businesses require a more sophisticated approach than most people think if you want to build something that's still around 10 years from now. Don't be afraid of that. Figure out what those lessons are. And I've written them out where you can read them in a weekend, but it's a 5-year plan, just to be clear. And you implement 3 of the lessons a year, each year
Right.
for 5 years. There's a total of 15. You do that, you'll still be around in 10 years. If you skip too many of them, you might just be a casualty. So take the time, be sophisticated about it, but build by design, on purpose, not just through hard work.
I think that is absolutely brilliant.
I
I
learned that one the
also,
hard way.
yeah, don't we all? Don't we all? Um, I really think it's important that our audience understand your books are extremely readable. As you said, they're readable in a weekend, but they will serve you for years after. And I couldn't recommend David's books more. We're going to link them to this podcast, and they are The Founder's Treadmill and Building a Business That Lasts. And I know there's 2 others, but these are the 2 we primarily talked about. But give us the library, David, please.
Sure. So probably the starting place, the founder's treadmill. Even if you're not on the treadmill, you need to know. Building with the end in mind, that'll take you more than a weekend. There's a lot of lessons and building strategies in it. This is for the business owner, not the job owner. The business owner who says, what's next? How does my story end? I want total control over that, and I want my business to continue.
David, is
That's
that
what
for the job owner
yeah.
that aspires to be a business owner?
No, this one's for
Nope.
the business owner.
Okay,
This,
gotcha.
you're off the treadmill. That's for the owner, though. For the owner's son, daughter, and key employees, I wrote a book called Acquiring Your Future. And basically, acquiring your future is for today's, I call them 30-something-year-olds. Might be a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old in there. It's for the son or the daughter who says, why should I buy in to my parents' business, my boss's business? How does it work? Where do I get the money? What if it doesn't, pan out? What if I want to buy more stock? What if I buy in and the boss dies or doesn't come back from vacation? Um, it's all about thinking about ownership and what the questions you need to ask. And then the final book, this is kind of the graduate level, is the Stewardship Advantage. The Stewardship Advantage is, how do you do it right? And that assumes that you've got a business. It assumes you've got extra to share. It assumes you want to build something that outlives and outlasts you. But it goes beyond good deeds and goes into a strategy and a plan called a stewardship plan. And I don't see enough people doing it. Our world needs small business owners to lead the way, to make their communities better and stronger, and to take their passions out there and help others with it. Take care of all your stakeholders. One
There's
last point.
no,
I don't use AI to write my books. I'm an old-fashioned guy, not quite typewriter old-fashioned. I sit down and I write. Each book, I write about 1 million words. Literally, I save all my drafts. I write 1 million words to get the best, 50 to 80,000. A lot of words on this cutting room floor. That's how I do it, and that's old-fashioned. But if you want to read my words, my thoughts, that's what's in my books.
And how many hours do you have into a book typically?
I'm when I write a book, I am all in, as my wife will tell you. I'm literally head down. It's all I think about. It's all I do. And so my first two books took me 1 year each to write. And I wasn't sure I could do it, right? All the doubts crept in. But when I got past the first two, I knew I could do it. I simply said, no more writer's block. I sit down, I write. I don't have to keep it. In fact, 9 out of 10 words I won't. But I'm going to write today. And I would write for 5 or 6 or 7 hours straight. My wife would come in and sometimes bring me food and come back later and warm it up. Because I didn't even see it hit the desk. So I can write a book in about 6 months.
Wow.
But that including editing, which is the hardest part.
Right.
But yeah, I can do it in about 6 months, 1 million words. I do not suffer from ideas. Who needs AI?
Exactly. Are you still consulting? Are you active in the consulting world?
And to be honest with you, if there's anything I love more than writing, it's teaching, which is to me consulting. And so I take on several clients a month, and some of them, as long as they speak English, they can be anywhere in the world. And I get on the phone with mom and dad, the founding owner, and 2 or 3 next gen owners. Brian, there's no better role to play in the world than to sit and share hopes and dreams, and then put the mechanics to the process and figure it out, lay out a plan, and execute it. I've got clients that call me back 20 years later, that are, the 30-something-year-olds now are, mid-50s. You know what they're doing? They're selling stock to the next generation at their own firm, going on to a 3rd generation. That's the ultimate success right there.
That's so cool. If people want to find you, David, where's the best place to do that?
Visit me at my author's website, www.davidgrausr.com.
And we will link that on our promos, and we will link it on this episode. David,
Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough for being so generous with your time and your wisdom. And I feel like I could sit and talk to you for hours. And I hope you will, when you have something that catches your interest, drop us a note. We'd love to have you on again.
Thank you, Brian. This is the most important podcast I think I've done this entire year.
You've just made every promo we're going to do, David. Thank you so much. Well, that's it for this episode of the most important podcast ever. A huge thanks to David Grau Sr. for doing 2 episodes with us and for sharing his story and his wisdom. And an even bigger thanks to you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, and how could you not, please share this with someone who will find it meaningful. You can watch and listen on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, and you can follow us on our social media, and you can find our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're growing. Please subscribe. It's free, and it helps us out a lot. With that, I thank you all. Thanks again, David, and we'll see you next week.